Hello guys and welcome back to EAK TV. We are today with Daniel from ICHI DAO. And Daniel, please introduce yourself, tell us about what's your experience, what's your background and what's ICHI.
Great, thanks so much for having me. So nowadays I'm at ICHI working a lot on product and partnerships. At ICHI we're a DAO, so we have a lot of different stewards who work together to build the kind of infrastructure, specifically financial and liquidity infrastructure for different DAOs. So that's what we do today. A little bit about my background. I'm actually originally started working in the blockchain space in 2016. Worked on scaling Bitcoin at the Columbia Blockchain Lab for a few years. And then moved over to IBM where I worked on some of their blockchain integration, specifically Hyperledger Fabric and building some permissioned blockchain. And then moved over into the DeFi and decentralized space into ICHI and have been building ICHI for the last 2 years. So it's been great.
What's the main mission of ICHI?
Yeah, so at ICHI we want to build infrastructure for DAOs. But also for institutional investors and others. We want to enable deep liquidity for different tokens because liquidity is the lifeblood of these different communities and these different projects. So we want to enable there to be a lot of liquidity for low slippage transactions, and we want to make sure that liquidity becomes something that can earn for people rather than just being a place where people lose money. So aligning liquidity providers and different projects together so that everyone can actually earn but also create a better liquid space for the different projects and different crypto infrastructure.
How do you start a DAO, like in general? How DAOs are funded or are created?
That's a great question. It tends to be different in a lot of different places. We've seen a lot of models. I think the important thing is that DAOs are still a little bit experimental, yes, and we're still learning the right ways to do it. Yeah. I've seen a bunch of models. I've seen models where they start kind of flat, super decentralized with some kind of, fair token launch, fair token event where everyone gets a bunch of tokens and contributors start to build. I've seen models where people start centralized and then start to actually decentralize over time as they build out a DAO and build out certain sections of the different business. So there's a lot of different models. To tell you that I know the best one would be a lie. I don't know the best way to do it, but there's a lot of innovation, and I think there are a lot of important use cases that DAOs really help push forward, and places where a DAO infrastructure is essential. So yeah, I guess there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Awesome. In terms of governance, that is quite of the same topic. Yeah. How do you see the current status of the industry, and how do you see or how do you envision a nice DAO model for the future?
Yeah, great question. So I think in the industry today, because we're very experimental still, we're learning the best way to build these DAOs and make governance really show what the general community wants or what the people who are contributing to the project want the project to do or where they see it going. A lot of the biggest DAOs today tend to be a little bit more centralized because there are a lot of main players who own a lot of the tokens, yes, and a lot of the votes tend to be kind of 90-95% on one answer. So like 95% yes, 5% no, and it's like, okay, this doesn't make sense. It's not really democratic. I think a lot of different people are looking at different ways to make it more fair, from quadratic voting to implementations that just kind of provide more of a answer and to the question of how do we lower manipulation and higher, the ability for democratic vote. So I think there's a lot of ways to go in actually developing the best way to govern these DAOs. But I think we're on a very good sort of trajectory to get there and for DAOs to really become a normal business model for different projects that are created.
Do you think that there is a trade-off between democratic decisions and being efficient?
Definitely. I think there's a bit of a trade-off when starting. I think definitely centralized entities where a single or a small group of decision makers make a decision, it tends to be a lot easier to move forward quickly. And I think in DAOs, if you decentralize extremely quickly, and at least in my experience, it tends to be something that kind of slows the development down. But I think that's in relation to specific use cases like building a product. If you take the example of, let's call it decentralized science, DeSci, right, as people call it today, there are these communities where you can't have a centralized entity decide what kind of research is approved to be talked about, what kind of research is allowed to be shared across different members. So in those cases, when there's already a group of people who care about a subject, it's a great way to start a DAO and create innovation pretty quickly without the slowing down of creation of product. You already have a community who needs to work together around a shared mission.
And you have like a clear set of values, and you have like a clear vision and mission, so it's gonna be easier that way.
Exactly.
Okay.
Great point.
Good. And what are the main challenges or problems that you are facing right now, or that you have faced, like in the development or in the journey of ICHI?
Yeah, so at ICHI right now we're at a place where we're building this infrastructure for people to be able to create liquidity. What we've seen is as we sort of build out to becoming a DAO, you have people who like to contribute a little bit. There's a lot of questions about token and token price, which tends to kind of sway people away a little bit from the actual important work. So we're really looking at how we can incentivize people to do the deep work, the important work to help the tech improve from a DAO perspective. So that tends to be a bit of a challenge in general. We've been super lucky where we've been able to innovate pretty quickly because we have a lot of very core members who are very focused on this full time, which is super helpful. But at the end of the day, some of these challenges come from innovating with a set group of people who want to decentralize, and that's kind of the next phase of how we're developing.
How contributors get rewarded for their job?
So today, it's very much kind of run like a company, right? Okay. Contributors get paid, people get hired based on certain votes in the DAO, because at the end of the day, the actual ICHI token gives you voting power for how ICHI is spent from the community treasury. Okay. So within that, people get hired, people get and have certain sets of milestones that they have to complete.
Okay. If not, they get fired?
I wouldn't say, kind of. It's not like in the classic word of like, that's it, you're gone.
Yes.
But it's more in the sense of, okay, you didn't complete your task in time, then the vote that happened basically is annulled and you have to develop in a different way.
Okay, and how can someone be part of the community, of ICHI's community, or how can they start working in ICHI if they want to?
Yeah, so we have a great ambassador program as a start. We like to see people start getting involved in our Discord, following us on Twitter, getting into Telegram, learning a little about the project, and then you start doing some really interesting work, whether it's a little bit of marketing or a little bit of business development to try to learn how ICHI works and how we can work with partners, and then down the line it kind of snowballs into a full-blown, full-time job with ICHI.
What would you say to someone who is interested in, let's say, start a DAO, but that doesn't know where to start?
It's a great question. I think you need to have that, like we talked about before, that set mission, that set shared share of values that you want. And if you have that and you have a community rallied around those values and that mission, I think that's a great place to start a DAO. If you're looking to do like a specific financial business product, a lot of times DAOs might not make sense because they're not for every use case, and maybe they make sense down the line in a future development of your actual company. So I think the biggest thing I would say is think very hard if you need to start out a DAO. Think really hard if you want a DAO at all. And if you have the right, set mission and set values and group of community, then go for a DAO. And if not, think about whether you want it in the future or if you don't even need a DAO.
Awesome. Daniel, thank you very much for your time, and thank you guys for being with us, and see you in the next chapter.